If wars can be started by lies, truth can be started, peace can be started by truth.
We have a rare bit of good news here, and strangely enough, it has to do with Julian Assange. So he actually had a court victory just on Monday. And here, let's take a read from the New York Times. Julian Assange can appeal decision to extradite him to US-UK court rules. The WikiLeaks founder has argued that American prison conditions would be harmful to his mental health. He faces a lengthy sentence if convicted on espionage charges. I mean, the opening paragraph, let's not even get into how much of propaganda it already is. And it's objective that American prisons are harmful to anyone's health, mental health, let alone their health. They're literally disgusting. They're the worst prisons in the world almost. They're fucking disgusting. And he faces a lengthy sentence if convicted on espionage charges. How could he do espionage if he's not a United States citizen and he was publishing news? But anyway. Anywho, a British court ruled on Monday that the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, can appeal a decision that would allow for his extradition to the United States, where he would face charges under the Espionage Act in connection with obtaining and publishing secret government documents. The latest twist in the long-running case comes after a high court decision last month that Mr. Assange could be extradited, a reversal of a lower court decision in a legal battle that has turned on whether prison conditions in the United States during his detention would be too harsh for his mental health. Lord Chief Justice Ian Burnett of the High Court, in announcing the ruling in a brief court appearance on Monday morning, endorsed a further appeal of the case to the Supreme Court on a narrow issue: the timing of when the United States provided assurances that Mr. Assange would be treated humanely in American prisons. The Biden administration gave those assurances to the British government when the case was already before the High Court, after a lower court had considered the case and ruled that American prison conditions were too harsh to extradite Mr. Assange, citing his mental health and the risk that he could be driven to suicide. The High Court did not endorse an appeal of the separate issue of whether those assurances were adequate and credible. Mr. Assange's legal team has also contested. Still, Stella Morris, Mr. Assange's partner, claimed victory outside the royal courts in central London after this announcement. What happened in court today is precisely what we wanted to happen, Miss Morris said. Make no mistake, she added. We won today in court. So, super rare case of something going right in this hellscape of a world we're living in. I'm not going to get my hopes up too high. I mean, I really hope that Julian Assange could see freedom. Just personally, it must be horrendous for him and everyone he knows what they're going through. But also, I mean, I kind of do believe in freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and this is also very important for that. You know, it's just the foundation, the bedrock of democratic processes in this country. In preparing to appeal the High Court's decision to permit the extradition, Mr. Assange's lawyers, in keeping with British court procedure, first asked the High Court to certify that an issue within its own ruling was a point of law of general public importance, essentially meaning it is worthy of the Supreme Court's attention. The High Court's decision that the timing issue meets the standard makes it more likely that the British Supreme Court will agree to take up any appeal, and Mr. Assange will now ask it to block his extradition, said Barry J. Pollock, an American lawyer for Mr. Assange. Even as Mrs. Morris and Mr. Assange's legal team described the day's events as a victory, they noted that he remained in detention. Julian has to be freed, Ms. Morris said, flanked by dozens of Mr. Assange's supporters who had gathered outside the court. And we hope that this will end soon. We are far from achieving justice in this case. Yeah, that should go without saying. I mean, this is a victory, but I mean, let's be serious. The guy is still persecuted. They're looking to prosecute this man. The U.S. is trying to get their hands on someone who is not one of their citizens and committed no crimes because he exposed the crimes of the United States. It's how people don't see this for what it is. It's very simple, it's very plain, it's very out there for all to see. This is the Western elite and government powers trying to destroy the free press. This is what it is. It is what it is. A spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Justice declined to comment. Even if the Supreme Court declines to hear Mr. Assange's appeal or rules against him regarding the assurances about his treatment, he has other options. His legal team could appeal to the High Court on other challenges to the extradition case, and the government would have the final word before he's extradited. Last year, a lower court rejected claims from Mr. Assange's legal team that the case against him itself was illegitimate, but nevertheless blocked the extradition request on the grounds that Mr. Assange might have been driven to suicide if he were held in the austere conditions of the highest security prison in the United States, citing his mental health. So even last year when his extradition was blocked, it wasn't because the judge was like, yeah, this is bullshit, he shouldn't get extradited. It was because it was technicality of his mental health. So that's important. Like, the original appeal to his extradition, the original block to his extradition wasn't because, hey, you know, this government has no right to do this. The United States has no right to, you know, basically kidnap you for doing journalism. No, it's because, yeah, you know, you're pretty depressed. You're very unhealthy at this point. You're on the verge of death and you'll probably die if you go there. They don't want that on their conscience, you know? The United States appealed that decision, and the Biden administration in October said that Mr. Assange would not be held in the American prison system's harshest conditions for high security prisoners. If he were convicted, it added, it would back any request he might make to serve any sentence in his native Australia. Last month, the High Court said it was satisfied by those late-coming assurances opened the door for the extradition of Mr. Assange. They just want this man behind bars. The U.S. is doing anything they can to make sure he has no freedom. Look at this. You know, if they're going to get blocked from extraditing to the United States because of health issues or this or that, just go serve it in Australia. Go serve the rest of your time behind bars in Australia. And how pathetic is Australia to let one of their own sovereign citizens just completely get harassed, persecuted by another nation? It's insane. It's really insane. What a weak country. Like, how I understand that everyone's under, like, they're just a satellite of the United States empire, but the charges against Mr. Assange center on the 2010 publication of diplomatic and military files on his website, WikiLeaks, after they were leaked by Chelsea Manning, a former Army intelligence analyst. The hundreds of thousands of State Department cables and military files published by WikiLeaks previously undisclosed information about civilian deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan, the scope and limits of evidence against Guantanamo detainees, and hidden diplomatic dealings, among other things. So they're saying he published State Department cables, military files about civilian deaths in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the scope and limits of evidence against Guantanamo detainees, hidden diplomatic dealings, among other things. In reality, what they were disclosing was the war crimes of the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan, the war crimes of having illegal torture facility of Guantanamo Bay, and how they had no evidence that any of the people there were even supposed to be there. Like, there's only like 3 or 4 people they could actually build a case on out of all the people that went through Guantanamo. So most of the people in there were innocent. Hidden diplomatic dealings. The cables showed that we were spying on all of our allies, including bugging Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone, the Chancellor of Germany. So it was more than hidden diplomatic dealings. I mean, it showed how big of pieces of shit we are. And then among other things, the most famous thing that WikiLeaks did and Chelsea Manning leaked is the collateral murder video. I mean, this video is infamous, and at this point, they're trying to bury it so bad that I can't even show it to you on YouTube. With this, you probably won't ever see this video if I put the collateral murder on it. The collateral murder video shows U.S. helicopter murdering civilians, including Reuters journalists, laughing about it, and then circling back and murdering the first responders who came to try and help those people. That's a war crime. No one was ever disciplined for it. No one ever saw any kind of action for it, except for there's just one person who was seen jail time for it, Chelsea Manning, and another person who were there trying really hard to put behind bars for this, Julian Assange, and he's de facto already served 11 years because, I mean, it's been already over a decade that this guy has either been locked in an embassy or locked in a prison at this point. The indictments, which were handed down during the Trump administration, accuse Mr. Assange of participating in a criminal hacking conspiracy, both by offering to aid Miss Manning in covering her tracks on a secure computer network, and by more broadly engaging hackers to steal secret material and send it to WikiLeaks. Any journalist helps their sources protect themselves, and any news agency or journalist worth their salt constantly is asking and advertising anyone in the government to leak to them. I mean, you could look at Twitter. It's full of journalists saying, you know, this is my number one signal. If you see anything you want to report, contact me. The indictments, which were handed down during the Trump administration, accuse Mr. Assange of doing journalism. That's basically what it is. Prosecutors have also accused Mr. Assange of violating the Espionage Act by soliciting and publishing information the government deemed secret, charges that could raise profound First Amendment issues. On conviction on those grounds could establish a precedent that such journalistic-style activities, a separate question from whether Mr. Assange himself counts as a journalist, may be treated as a crime in the United States. This attack on Julian Assange is an attack on the First Amendment. This isn't about Julian Assange. This is about what he was doing. He should not face criminal prosecution and decades in prison for publishing truthful information of great public importance, Mr. Bullock said. The trial is playing out in a British courtroom after Mr. Assange spent years holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, fleeing there in 2012 as he faced an investigation on accusations of sexual assault in Sweden. The case was eventually dropped. Look at this smear. They're acting like he went to the Ecuadorian embassy because he was charged with sexual assault. That's not why he went to the Ecuadorian embassy. He went to the Ecuadorian embassy to try and escape the United States. That's why he was there. This whole sex assault in Sweden is fucking made up. The police never filed charges. The supposed victim said it never happened. It's not real. It's not real. This is a sophisticated smear of Julian Assange. Even when they're writing an article in the New York Times about the good news for him, they're still fucking smearing him. It's crazy. It's crazy. And burying the truth every chance they get, you know, whether it's lies of omission or, you know, false equivalencies, whatever it is. They're going to paint a picture for you. This is the New York Times. The trial is playing out in a British courtroom. I already read that. He was ejected from the embassy in 2019. On the same day, the United States unsealed an initial indictment against him on a hacking-related charge. He's not a hacker. He was a publisher. Weeks later, he was charged under the Espionage Act and has been detained in Belmarsh Prison in London since 2019. Supporters of Mr. Assange at the courthouse waved placards with his face and the message, "Free Assange," as they cheered the small victory, but lamented that it would be likely to draw out his legal process for additional months. Rebecca Vincent, who has been monitoring the extradition hearing for Reporters Without Borders, and was in the courtroom on Monday, said the decision was a welcome one. This is positive because there's another point of review here in the UK. There's another stage with the courts rather than politicians that could see extradition refused, she said. So we very much hope that this is the outcome. Oh, and they issued a correction. Let's look at this. Correction, January 25th, 2022. An earlier version of this article referred incorrectly to accusations of rape and sexual assault against Mr. Assange in Sweden. The authorities carried out an investigation, but he was never charged. I wonder what it said the first time around, because what did they say this time? So, yeah, they're accusing him of starting his own imprisonment because he was afraid for facing his rape charges in Sweden. He never did that. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. And, even in the article, they're saying, fleeing there in 2012 as he faced an investigation on accusations of sexual assault in Sweden. The case was eventually dropped. Correction, an earlier version of this article referred incorrectly to accusations of rape and sexual assault against Mr. Assange in Sweden. The authorities carried out an investigation, but he was never charged. So anyway, a little bit of good news for Julian Assange. Hopefully this guy can get the fuck out of there. Out of Belmarsh. Hopefully he's never extradited to this hellhole of a country where they'll put him in Supermax and put him in, solitary confinement for 24 hours a day until he kills himself. Or until they kill him, or until he Jeffrey Epstein's himself, whatever. It's fucked up. Super fucked up. I mean, how many people have the skill set to pull off what Julian Assange did with building something like WikiLeaks and making a system where people can anonymously give you all this information and expose the powerful? So few people are that capable. And then now, after over a decade of the entire Western world trying to make this man's life a living hell and put him in either in a grave or in a cell, the very few people who could pull off what he could pull off, how likely are they to even do that at this point? And that is the whole point of what they're doing. This is to make sure citizen journalism dies, to make sure the First Amendment dies, to make sure freedom of speech dies, freedom of the press dies. It's fucked up.
Or the pseudo-democracies that we are evolving into. Wars are a result of lies. The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. Here. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist? When we understand that wars come about as a result of lies peddled to the British public and the American public and the publics all over Europe and other countries, then who are the war criminals? It is not just leaders, it is not just soldiers, it is journalists. Journalists are war criminals. And why one might think that that should lead us to a state of despair, that the reality that is constructed around us is constructed by liars, is constructed by people who are close to those that they are meant to be policing. It should lead us also to an optimistic understanding, because if wars can be started by lies, truth can be started, peace can be started by truth.